Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep underground, right beneath St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican.
Yeah, one of the most famous buildings in the world.
Yeah,
And what lies beneath is, well, just as fascinating.
absolutely. And, the whole story of St. Peter, the first pope, traditionally his martyrdom, his burial in Rome,
Uh-huh.
it's so central to Christianity.
It really is. And the tradition has always been that he was buried right there on Vatican Hill,
Yeah.
near Nero's circus, apparently.
Right. And what always strikes me is how persistent that belief was. I mean, you have Emperor Constantine way back in the 4th century
Uh-huh.
making a point of building the first St. Peter's Basilica directly over where they thought Peter was buried.
Exactly. And then the current basilica, centuries later, stayed on that exact spot.
Yeah.
It just shows how incredibly important that specific location has always been for the church. It wasn't just symbolic, it was tied to that ground.
Totally. So you can imagine the buzz when, back in 1939, under Pope Pius XII, they actually started a major archaeological dig to see what was really down there.
Yeah.
So our mission today in this deep dive is to unpack that whole exploration. We'll look at, the timeline, how they actually did the digging.
The methods, yeah. And some of the really key finds, like the red wall.
And that amazing Petrosini graffiti, Peter is here, just wild.
It really is. And we also need to get into the bones they found, the scientific analysis.
Right, the controversy around that, too.
Definitely. And how Pius XII announced it quite cautiously at first. Plus, the fact you can actually go down there now on the Scavi tour.
Oh, yeah, we'll touch on that. And then pull back to look at the bigger picture, the historical weight, the religious meaning, and, the ongoing debates.
It's a lot to cover, but it's such a compelling story.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What actually kicked things off in the late 1930s? It wasn't like a direct search for Peter's tomb initially, was it?
No, that's a really important point. It wasn't like, let's go find Peter. The trigger was actually Pope Pius I's death in February 1939. He had expressed a wish to be buried near St. Peter's tomb, which is traditionally located in the Vatican grottos. That's sort of the level beneath the main basilica floor.
Right, kind of an intermediate level with other papal tombs.
Exactly. So they needed to make space for Pius XI's tomb, which involved lowering the floor level in that part of the grottos.
And that's when they found something unexpected.
That's exactly it. As they were lowering the floor, the workers broke through. Suddenly, they were looking down into a much older level, an ancient Roman mortuary, a necropolis.
Wow, just stumbled upon it.
Right.
Right beneath the grottos. So what happened then? Pius XII had just become pope.
Right. And Pope Pius XII, he knew about historical documents in the Vatican archives that mentioned Peter's burial site. This accidental discovery. Well, it must have seemed incredibly significant.
You'd think so.
So he made the call, launch a much bigger, more systematic archaeological dig. It started in June 1939, but very, very quietly kept under wraps.
Secretly digging under St. Peter's. And I read somewhere that an American businessman helped pay for it.
Yeah, that's right. George Strake, an oil man from Houston, apparently provided significant funding. It's one of those slightly unexpected twists in the story.
Definitely adds a layer. So this secret dig goes on for what, about a decade? What did they actually uncover down there?
They uncovered this vast Roman necropolis, mostly from the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, just packed with tombs.
What kind of tomb?
A real mix, actually. You had pagan tombs, the statues, decorations reflecting Roman beliefs about the afterlife. But crucially, they also found tombs with early Christian symbols and imagery.
Ah, so
So-
clear evidence of Christians being buried there too, alongside pagans.
Exactly. It showed this is a burial ground used by different communities living in Rome at the time. And maybe the biggest find, archaeologically speaking, was the confirmation that Constantine's Basilica from the 4th century
Yeah.
was deliberately, precisely built right over this existing necropolis.
So he didn't just pick Vatican Hill generally. He targeted this specific burial area.
It seems so. It really highlights how revered that spot must have been, even that early on. Constantine was making a very specific statement by building his massive church there.
That's huge. Okay, but digging underneath the structure like St. Peter's Basilica, I mean, the weight, the foundations, that must have been incredibly tricky.
Oh, immensely challenging. The work had to be incredibly careful. It was mainly done by these specialized Vatican workmen, the Sampietrini, overseen by professional archaeologists.
Sampietrini.
Yeah, literally St. Peter's men. They're the traditional maintenance crew for the basilica.
Gotcha.
Their main job was excavating without, causing the basilica to collapse. A pretty high-stakes situation.
I'll say. How did they manage it?
Very slowly, painstakingly, using basic hand tools for a lot of the delicate work alongside, whatever else was needed. And documentation was key, recording everything they found.
And they ran into problems.
Oh, yeah. Water seepage was a big issue, apparently.
Right.
And they actually had to reinforce some of the basilica's foundations as they went deeper. It was not straightforward.
You mentioned archaeologists. Were there specific people leading this? Key figures we should know about?
Definitely. Several key players. Obviously, Pope Pius XII himself, who started it all and kept a close eye on things.
Right.
Then there was Monsignor Ludwig Kaas. He was like the project manager, handling the logistics, the administration.
Okay.
And Father Antonio Ferrua, a Jesuit. He was a top expert on early Christian catacombs and epigraphy, that's the study of inscriptions. He was really central to the digging in the early stages.
An inscriptions expert. That sounds important for later.
Hugely important. And then joining later was Margherita Guarducci, another brilliant archaeologist and epigrapher. She played a massive role in figuring out the bones and deciphering some key graffiti.
Guarducci. Okay, I've heard her name.
And finally, Professor Venerando Carenti. He was the anthropologist brought in to do the scientific analysis on the bones themselves.
So, quite a team, but I think you mentioned earlier there was some friction later on.
Yes, the sources suggest some definite disagreements emerged, especially between Father Ferrua and Margherita Guarducci about how to interpret some of the finds. Different perspectives, different conclusions. And there's also that detail about Monsignor Kaas. Apparently, early on, he quietly collected some bone fragments that Ferrua's team had initially found and sort of set aside.
Really? Why would he do that?
It's not entirely clear. Maybe he just had a hunch, or perhaps didn't fully trust the initial assessment. He stored them away secretly.
Intriguing. Okay, let's get into the big finds, the landmarks. You mentioned the Red Wall. Tell us about that.
Okay, the Red Wall. They found it in 1942. It's basically a brick wall, but it was covered in this very distinctive red plaster, dated to around 160 AD.
So pretty early. Where exactly was it?
It was in this area they labeled Field P. And Field P was considered the most sacred spot in the whole necropolis, right beneath the confession area of the current Basilica, near the high altar.
The heart of it all.
Pretty much. This red wall actually formed the backdrop for another key feature, the Trophy of Gaius. And the wall itself had niches built into it.
Niches, like for offerings or something.
Possibly. It strongly suggests it was a place people came to venerate something or someone.
Yeah.
It also physically connected to the graffiti wall, which is another crucial piece.
Right, the graffiti wall. That sounds amazing. What was that?
Also found in 1942, built maybe a bit later, around 250 AD. It was located just north of that little shrine, trophy, and right next to the red wall.
And covered in graffiti.
Literally covered. Scratched into the plaster by early Christian pilgrims. You find names, simple Christian symbols, prayers.
Wow.
And then the most famous inscription, Petros Eni, Greek, meaning Peter's here or Peter's inside.
Chills. Just thinking about someone scratching that there nearly 1,800 years ago.
Exactly. Margherita Guarducci saw this as, well, pretty direct evidence pointing to Peter's burial right there.
I can see why.
And what's more, there was a niche, like a small compartment, in this graffiti wall. And inside that niche, they found a collection of human bones.
The bones attributed to Peter.
Those are the ones, yeah. Apparently, Father Ferrua initially didn't think the wall itself was that significant, but Guarducci later painstakingly deciphered the graffiti and found Peter's name scratched on it more than 20 times.
20 times. They really wanted to mark that spot.
It seems so. Risking persecution to leave their mark. That phrase, Petros Eni, it just resonates, doesn't it? Captures that intense early devotion.
It absolutely does. When you keep mentioning the Trophy of Gaius, what exactly was that?
So the Trophy of Gaius is this small structure, an edicule, basically a little shrine or monument.
Okay.
It was identified as the very monument mentioned by a Roman writer, a presbyter named Gaius, around the year 200 AD.
So there's a written record of it.
Yes. Gaius wrote about seeing trophies, memorials of the apostles Peter and Paul in Rome. This structure found in the necropolis seems to fit his description of Peter's memorial perfectly. It dates to around 150, 167 AD.
Wow. So that links the archaeology directly back to a very early Christian text.
Precisely. It's a crucial piece of corroborating evidence, connecting the physical finds with the literary tradition.
Okay, so we have these specific, incredibly significant structures, but the dig uncovered the whole burial ground, right? It's the wider necropolis?
Exactly. It wasn't just about that one spot. They unearthed numerous tombs, mausolea, stretching from the 1st century AD right up to the 4th.
What did that tell them?
Oh, a huge amount about Roman life and death back then. Burial practices, religious beliefs. Some tombs had inscriptions with names, sometimes even little biographical details.
Glimpses of ordinary people.
Yeah, and finding those Christian symbols and votive offerings in some tombs, scattered amongst the pagan ones, really confirmed that early Christian presence within the wider Roman community there.
Any other interesting finds in the necropolis generally?
Well, they found coins dating back even to the 1st century AD, which helps with dating the site's use. And they also found physical remnants of Constantine's original 4th century basilica built on top of it all.
So you can literally see the layers of history.
You really can. It's not just a cemetery. It's like a time capsule of this period of transition in Rome. You see the old Roman ways alongside this emerging Christian faith, all in one place. That juxtaposition is powerful.
Okay, let's talk about the bones, because ultimately that's what captures so much attention. Where were they found again?
Right, so there were a few sets of bones discussed. Some were found near the Red Wall back in 1942, and initially people wondered if those might be Peter's.
Okay.
Then remember, Monsignor Caz secretly collected some fragments. Those were separate.
Right, the ones he stashed away.
But the main focus eventually shifted to another set of bones discovered in 1953. These were found inside that niche, that repository, in the graffiti wall.
The wall with Petrosini on it?
Exactly. Apparently, these were removed, possibly by Caz or someone else, without the main archaeological team knowing it first. It was these bones from the graffiti wall niche that Margherita Guarducci dedicated years to studying.
And her research led to Professor Carenti's analysis in the 60s.
Yes. Carenti, the anthropologist, conducted a detailed examination in 1962. His findings were, well, pretty remarkable.
What did he find?
He concluded the bones belonged to a single individual, a male, quite robustly built, likely between 60 and 70 years old when he died, and about 5 foot 6 inches tall.
Does that fit with Peter?
It's certainly consistent, yeah. Age, likely build.
Yeah.
It fits the general profile. But there was more.
Go on.
There was evidence suggesting the bones had been wrapped in a very valuable cloth, dyed purple with threads of gold woven in.
Purple and gold. That sounds imperial almost.
It was associated with high status, yes. Maybe suggesting veneration very early on. And perhaps the most striking thing, the skeletal damage.
What kind of damage?
Signs consistent with crucifixion, specifically upside-down crucifixion according to tradition, and also evidence suggesting the feet had been violently severed.
Which matches the stories of his martyrdom.
It aligns, yes.
Yeah.
And one more thing. Soil found embedded in the bones reportedly matched soil samples taken from near the Trophy of Gaia's shrine.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot of points lining up. Did they carbon date the bones?
No, they didn't. Apparently, the decision was made not to avoid damaging the fragments. Carbon dating back then was more destructive than it is now.
Right. That makes sense. So a lot of circumstantial evidence, all pointing one way. But you said there's still debate.
Oh, absolutely. It's crucial to stress that. While Pope Paul VI in 1968 felt the accumulated evidence was convincing, Pope Pius XII back in 1950 had been much more cautious in his announcement. And Father Farua, one of the original archaeologists, remained skeptical about the identification until his death.
So not everyone on the team agreed.
Not at all. And scholarly debate continues today. Historians, archaeologists, they look at the same evidence and sometimes reach different conclusions. It's compelling, yes, but definitive scientific proof, that's harder to claim. It remains circumstantial.
Let's talk about that 1950 announcement by Pius XII. It sounds like a major moment, but also carefully managed.
It really was. He made the announcement in his Christmas radio message, big platform. He did announce the discovery of what he called St. Peter's tomb.
So he used the word tomb.
He did. But when it came to the bones, his language was very nuanced, very cautious about saying definitively, these are Peter's remains.
Why the caution, do you think?
Probably several reasons. As we said, the lack of absolute proof at that point. The initial bone discovery near the Red Wall was maybe less compelling than the later finds in the graffiti wall niche.
Oh, okay.
Then there were those internal disagreements among the experts working on the project that couldn't have helped.
Right, the Farua-Guarducci differences.
Exactly. And there were even some reports flying around about a possible alternative tomb of Peter found in Jerusalem, though that's generally dismissed now. Plus, the whole post-war context.
Yeah.
Maybe he just felt it wise to be careful.
So acknowledge the significance, but don't overstate the certainty.
That seems to be the approach he took. He talked beautifully about how the site evolved from a humble grave to the foundation of this immense basilica, but held back on a final verdict on the bones themselves.
Makes sense. Now, you mentioned people can visit today. The Scavi tour, how does that work?
Yet it's possible. The Vatican necropolis, or the Scavi, is open for guided tours. But, and this is important, you absolutely have to book way in advance.
Why is that?
Well, the space down there is tight. It's a sensitive archaeological site, so they only take very small groups through at a time. You book directly via the official Vatican Excavations Office website.
And what do you actually see on the tour?
It's incredible, apparently. You walk through parts of that Roman necropolis we've been talking about. You see the ancient tombs, the shrines, the different levels, all dating from the 1st to 4th centuries.
Do you see the graffiti wall?
Yes. That's often highlighted as a key moment on the tour. Seeing those inscriptions, including maybe catching a glimpse of Petrosini, and the tour culminates very close to where the actual tomb is believed to be, right underneath the main altar of the basilica above.
So you're literally standing layers below the high altar.
Exactly. Though some parts of the necropolis are still off limits for structural reasons, but you get right into the heart of it. The Vatican website for St. Peter's Basilica actually has a lot of great info and images, too, if people want to explore online. Sections on the trophy, Area P, specific tombs, even the bones.
Good resource. And are there books people could read?
Oh, definitely. For detailed accounts, Margherita Garducci's own book, The Tomb of St. Peter, is obviously key, though less for strong convictions. There's also a good one by John Evangelist Walsh called The Bones of St. Peter that lays out the story well.
Great suggestions. Okay, pulling it all together then. What's the lasting significance of these discoveries? Historically, religiously?
It's just immense, especially for the Catholic Church and, billions of believers. Well, first, the archaeology provides really strong physical support for that centuries-old tradition of Peter being buried on Vatican Hill. It gives weight to Constantine's choice to build there.
It validates the tradition.
In many ways, yes. It helps counter historical arguments that maybe Peter never even came to Rome. Finding evidence of his veneration there so early on is powerful.
And that connects to the papacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It reinforces the whole idea of apostolic succession, the Pope as Peter's direct successor. For Catholics, this physical link to Peter's likely resting place deepens the sense of connection to the Church's origins and the authority of the papacy.
And the inscriptions.
Those early Christian inscriptions on the graffiti wall.
Yeah.
They're among the oldest tangible relics we have of Christian faith and practice in Rome. They show that continuity of belief right there.
A physical touchstone.
Exactly. It makes the connection feel very real, very physical. It's not just abstract belief. Pilgrims feel they're near the very foundation stone.
Yeah.
And beyond the purely religious side, it's just incredible history.
How so?
It gives us this amazing window into Roman society during that crucial shift from paganism to Christianity. We learn about burial customs, social structures, everyday life just from studying the necropolis. You see the tombs of ordinary Romans right alongside this spot, venerated as Peter's tomb. It's history brought to life.
So let's try and sum up this deep dive. We've covered the accidental discovery leading to the secret excavation.
Yeah, uncovering that whole Roman necropolis.
Plus some key landmarks like the Red Wall and especially the graffiti wall with Petrosini.
Peter is here. And then the analysis of the bones found in that wall's niche. The age, the height, the manner of death aligning with tradition.
Right, but also acknowledging the caution from Pius XII initially, even if Paul VI later called the identification convincing.
Exactly. It's this blend, isn't it? A really compelling convergence of evidence, tradition, text, archaeology, biology, but still falling short of absolute undeniable proof for some scholars.
Yeah, that mix of strong evidence and lingering questions.
But regardless of the final certainty on the bones themselves, the historical and religious impact is undeniable. It anchors the tradition of Peter in Rome in a way nothing else could. And it opens up that whole world of early Christianity and Roman life beneath the basilica floor.
It truly does. So a final thought for our listeners. When you think about these layers upon layers, Roman tombs, early Christian graffiti, Constantine's church, the Renaissance basilica, all stack on this one spot. What does that tell you about belief, about memory, about how we connect with the past?
It certainly makes you think about the power of place and the persistence of faith through centuries of change.
Definitely something to ponder. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.